I'm Arthur Spaugh, longtime Moravian, born and bred a Moravian, and happy to be one. Today we're going to take a trip through Home Moravian Church, built in 1800. We'll begin talking about the outside, where it was located, how it replaced the Gamalion House, Spaugh, and then we're going to go into the interior and discuss what changes have been made inside, because there have been relatively few changes on the outside. And then we'll be discussing the parts of the inside, like the Lovey's room and the attic, and we'll be mentioning the clock, and we're just going to have a good time going through our church. Built by the wonderful settlers who came from Europe, and with their determination and their devotion, and put together the town of Salem. They built the Gamalion House, Congregational House, here on the site where Main Hall is now located. Now the Gamalion House was like the Single Brothers house. It was a big building, had a stone base, and in it was the Gamalion Hall for worship, the apartment for the minister, and the girls' school when they first started, and the administrator's home, and the Single Sisters, because their choir house had not been built. This was built in 1771. When it was dedicated, that was November the 13th, 1771, and that became the birthday of Home Moravian Church congregation. In time, it got too crowded in this hall, and they've been discussed many times where to put the church, but in 1797 they really got serious about it, and the Elders Conference, which is now our Board of Elders, decided it was time to decide on a place, but where to put it. The first place they considered was on this side of the square, between this empty lot here and the Single Sisters Choirs building. But that would be taking part of the Single Sisters' yard, and we were concerned about that. So they did what the Moravians brought over here as a custom. They devoutly prayed about their decision and decided they would go with Christ's will, and they'd put it to the lot. Now the lot was something that was brought from Germany. That was the way they made some serious decisions that would affect the congregation and affect the mission that they were on. It was a little bowl that had 3 reeds in it. One has a paper in it that says Yah, one that says 9, and one blank, which means wait. Well, they submitted it to the lot, and much to the relief of the Single Sisters, it came up 9. So that that was out. So the second place they looked at was right next to the boys' school, where the inspector's house is now located. It was submitted to the lot, and it said 9. So the third place was in this empty lot just north of the Gamalion House, and it came up yes. So that was a place, that was a site. Now just think, what would have happened if that empty lot there had the church on it? How could Salem College have grown? And what would happen if Home Church didn't have that lot, because it couldn't have grown to the back and it couldn't have enlarged. So that was certainly the right place to be. Once they had decided, then it was time to get busy and come up with plans for building it. And Frederick William Marshall was the administrator at that time, and he is the one that designed the first buildings. And a lot of this material and pictures of what he designed is in a little book called The Home Moravian Church, written by Dr. Frank Albright, who for many years was the director of research for Old Salem Incorporated and a member of Home Moravian Church, an active one too. And he wrote this little book for dedicated to the interpreters of Home Church. And in his book, and I recommend it to you, he tells a lot of details I'm going to be presenting to you from what he has written. Also in your tour you will see some watercolors by Pauline Bonson Gray, who did a beautiful job depicting early Salem scenes with her artwork. The structure is balanced in that it's 46 feet wide, double that is 92, and that's how long it is. And the top of the weather vane is 92 feet. So it's kind of a balanced building. Its gable is to the street, and so that the sun, the southern sun, does not interfere with the worship services. The congregation sat facing the north, where there was a low table for the communion. The men sat on the left side and the women sat on the right side. And they did not like not having a front door for the women. So the plans called for a hallway to be built from a door that's out on the sidewalk in line with the front door the men went in, that went down the side, had a roof on it, and that's why you see those steps and the unusual elevation raise on the south side. And that shelter allowed the women to come in the front door too. But in time, it needed such repair that they were no longer sitting separate, and they took that down and everybody used the front door. So that was an interesting part of history that you need to study the old paintings and old pictures to discern that. Now, when Frederick William Marshall designed the building, he made a draft, floor plan, foundation plan, and it was submitted. A number of drafts were submitted before they came up with the final, which you see before you. Starting at the top, the weather vane, can you make out what's on the weather vane? It's the number 1800, and that weather vane is over 5 feet long. Up on the top of the weather vane, you see what looks like maybe a butterfly, which some people thought it was a symbol of the resurrection, but actually it's a tulip leaf. That's a motif that's in the original chandeliers that are now in the church. Below the weather vane is a sphere that's about 6.5 feet around the middle and about 7.5 feet around the vertical. And it's gilded in gold, which makes a statement when you come over the horizon from the south and you're coming from Kernersville down to Salem. For the roof of the belfry, they were not able to get copper. So they used the heaviest tin they could find and painted it Brunswick green. The bell was made in Bethlehem in 1771 and was put in a tower in the northeast corner of the square, later moved to just north of the Gemeinhaus. Then in 1800, it was moved up to the belfry, and that bell has been rung ever since 1772, when it was located in the tower down here. The clock was made in Herrnhut and shipped over, and it came in 1791, and they put that in the tower. But when the church was built, they moved it up beneath the gable. The outside of the church is pretty much like it was. The balcony, that was the trombone balcony, where they played the songs that indicated who had died. A member of what choir the deceased was. Widow's choir, the single men, or the children's choir, or the different choir. That's the way they got the word out. Coming down the front of the church, you see the windows. Those windows are the only ones in the church in their original configuration. The granite windowsills are something that was unusual, and of course the hood is a Moravian feature that has been used in many places because of the Moravian influence. An unusual situation was in 1800, it was considered fashionable to have a brick building that had the corners extenuated, and it was done in Williamsburg, like the Wythe House, by people rubbing brick till it became a different color. Well, that was not possible here in Salem. People were too busy doing other things, so they painted it. They painted those around the corner and around the windows and around the front door and up the side, and until it wore off and it became unfashionable to have it like that. The window frames and doors, as well as the belfry and steeple, were painted a light yellow color. Before we go inside to see the sanctuary, I want to tell you about the handrails. These are the original handrails from 1800. Samuel Schultz, the blacksmith here in Salem, beat these things out, and they call it Norwegian iron because it takes so much pounding and to get the imperfections out, to keep it from rusting. And these are the original, and they never have rusted. And it's been amazing how they have stood up over all these years without rusting. You'll notice the front door, it looks like it has 3 panels to it. But that's not the way it actually is. When you open this door, it's wider than this door. And the reason for that is that this door was open in the wintertime when they didn't want the wind to come in. But this door was open for a casket to come out. So it would be wide enough for a casket to come out, but they didn't want the cold air to come in with all that big door. So that's an interesting feature. You're now in a space that you're well familiar with. I'm looking at a photograph that was produced approximately 1860, which after all was 60 years old at that time, and a number of changes have been made, but you can get a feel for the original church, and we don't have any paintings of the inside of the church. But when you look at the picture, you'll notice that I'm looking west. The organ was on the west, above the west door, in which the men came in. The south door is the entrance for the ladies, and on the north wall there were 4 windows in this spanse, and south wall there were 4 windows. Now the first change that was made is from this, and when you see this picture, is that it has to the right is the pulpit that's a little different from what it was originally, because it was originally on a platform down on the lower level. And you'll see the organ, how it's set up there on the balcony, and there was a balcony that did go around in the U shape that was later taken down in the 1870 change. You'll notice the recessed lighting. Already they had removed the candle lighting. The original church had chandeliers like you see here today. There were 5 in the original ones in the church. 4 were put in the attic, and 1 was put in the museum, Boys School Museum. And in 1959 and 60, redecorating, the original 4 were brought down and put up above, and 2 new ones were reproduced and added to that renovation. Now, an interesting fact is the next big change that we had was the Gemeinhaus. The Gemeinhaus sat next door, as we mentioned, and by 1841, the school was anxious to have that space. They needed it. But the church could not give it up because they were using the Saal for cold winter times and small gatherings for small funerals and things, and they needed a Saal. And also they needed a place for the minister and his family. So the church and the school cut a deal. The deal was that the school would pay for a small chapel to be added to the north side of the church. And the ministers would have a house up where the bishop's house is, like 1841 bishop's house. And that was the deal they cut in a cooperation, and that was a real good change for the girls' school and the church. The next change to the church that was well received was in 1855. Heat was added to the church, and it occurred by building a tunnel, digging a tunnel to the center of the center aisle and putting a grate there, and having the Love Feast kitchen supply the fire that would be blown into the church. Then the next big change was in 1870, and it became the Victorian period. They decorated the Victorian period. They kept the same outside walls, but they reconfigured the church with the organ up there, but you turn around to the other end And now you're looking at the pulpit. And the pulpit and the two doors in the balcony are still in the location that they were in this picture. But the balcony was changed and rebuilt. It's still in a U shape, but it was different, and it was held up by 8 cast iron pillars. They're still the same pillars that you see in our church today. They also, on that east wall, east side, they built a 3-story building that housed the new Love Feast kitchen, because the Love Feast kitchen had been in the basement under the east end of the sanctuary. You can notice the glass lights that were here being used in 1870. And you'll notice also that the seating configuration had been changed. There was a center section and a right section and a left section, and no longer were the men sitting on one side and the women sitting on another. But this lasted until the next big change. But now we'll take a look and go through this right door and take a look at the additional wing that was added on the east. They added 3 stories on this east end, and this opens up into the 3 stories. This is the serving rooms that were added, and you can see many of you are familiar with these rooms because you've helped serve Love Feasts, and what a time that has been. This is one of the windows, stained glass, that was in that 1870 edition, and this is where the women put their baskets. These tables for Love Feasts are lined up with the empty cups, and the men bring their kettles up from downstairs and pour the coffee just in time for the service. After the empty cups are collected, they're brought in and can be put on this dumbwaiter and taken down to the kitchen for washing. And it can also be used to bring up things too. It goes up to all 3 floors. Welcome to the 1800 Love Feast kitchen. Here's our original fireplace with the panel still intact. Beyond it is a vaulted storage room where the wood was stacked, slid in from the outside. And that's the tunnel that was cut in 1855 when the church first got heat in it. They built that tunnel, and heat from the fireplace was channeled into that center of the building, and there was a grate in the center aisle that allowed heat to rise up. Then on this other end is the original board and batten herringbone door and steps that went to the outside, and there was a outside stairway up to the south vestibule that they brought in the Love Feast. This is the inside of the herringbone door with its original keyhole and the way the nails are turned under, and hardware, with some later hardware added. But the original hinges are here. This is our current Love Feast kitchen that was in the addition added to 1870. And the men come down, and here are the kettles that they fill up. They line up on the side and get a kettle and come back around, and they put their, Tony has coffee working for them, and they fill their pot up, and then they go upstairs. And that's where they serve it into the trays and the coffee cups. Then, after the service is over, the trays of empty coffee cups are often put on this dumbwaiter. Some are carried down, but this dumbwaiter can take us up to the 3rd floor and load up the coffee cups and bring it back down and open them up and put them out on this table. And then the dishwasher prepares them and puts them on the racks for the dishwasher. And that has saved a lot of time, a lot of effort when we got a dishwasher. So we've come a long way from the fireplace next door. Now we're on the 2nd floor of that addition, and we use it as a preparation room for our love feast. It was originally used as a Sunday school, and when it was converted, they added the dumbwaiter that takes empty coffee and empty mugs downstairs. At the other end down here, behind that door, was a passageway, a bridge over to Main Hall when it was built. Down at this end of the room, they blocked it off, and it's our broadcast room. The radio broadcast from Home Church of the Sunday School program was started in 1930 with WSJS, and it's the oldest continuous running religious broadcast in the country. And we're proud of WSJS for doing that. Inside, you'll see that we're up to date with the TV and with the web plus radio. And we've come a long way in this area. In 1912 and 13, that addition put in this balcony, slope balcony, and so you had to come up 7 steps here and only 2 steps down there in the other room to come up into this tiered balcony. The balcony came up to the top of these windows when it was put in, and this is what you have from up here on the second in the balcony. From up here you get a good view of the changes that were made in the campaign in 2009. It's our time, it's our home, and it's a beautiful sanctuary you see now. You get a good view of the 2 windows on either side that were added in that 1912 and 13 edition. You get a good view of the new choir loft as it was put in with our last campaign. And we're coming over to the west side of the balcony. We're now coming down onto the bell ringing level from the slope balcony, and here we have the pull for the bell that is pulled every Sunday to announce church. When you open this, you see the channel, and you can look up and you can see the 2 weights that ring the bell and the clock. And down here at this level, there's a wooden floor. And when the winder was winding up the box, the chain broke and the rock fell. And she rushed down into the foyer thinking that she'd find the rock in the middle of the terrazzo on the west vestibule, but it broke through this floor into a pit that had sawdust or bags of something that caught the rock. In other words, they had planned for, if that ever happened, it wouldn't hurt the ceiling in the foyer. We're now in the attic of the 1800 church, and new engineers can be amazed at the structure that the brothers built to hold up the roof and the shingles and this building. And in this up here was the bellows of the organ. And the organ is on loan to Old Salem Incorporated, and when they wanted to also restore the bellows, we added to the agreement that they would fix 2 panels, educational panels, for people who are visiting in the future. And we have this note, appreciation to Old Salem Incorporated for restoring the Tannenberg organ, for providing a place for it to be heard, and for preparing these two information panels. And this panel shows an interesting picture of where the bellows were before they took it away. And here's something they found when they were being restored, the organ was being restored, and the bellows were being restored. They found this note pasted inside, and it said, repaired August the 11th, 1885, by F.C. Manning, W.H. Miller, J.D. Fogel. Wendy John Fogel likes watermelon and the gals, and it's by W.F. Miller Lifter. That's what they were called, lifters. And they lifted the bellows there and kept it going downstairs. Here's another shot of the attic that shows the upper construction, the stairwell up to the clock, and then on up into the belfry with the bell that we love to hear. And holding up the whole roof system are 5 trusses. They are 12 by 12 yellow pine, and they are 50 feet long and they're 25 feet high. And you can see how they're put together. They're tapered 45 degrees, and they fit into a groove, and then a tenon is hammered in to hold it in place. This particular one here shows the iron rod that is holding up the spans of the ceiling. Here's another one of the truss, and it gives you a good view of how the iron rod, the 1-inch iron rod, goes from the truss down through the floor to the next beam, which holds up the ceiling. This is another interesting view of the structure of the attic. We love our air condition, but it takes away from the beauty of what was up here by the men who built this church. You'll note how the large truss, 5 large trusses stand out going down to this view of the attic that hold up the ceiling and hold up the roof. This is an unusual construction. What could it be? It's a trapdoor that can be rolled up and let the church ventilate hot air. And it also was used for a while for the band to come up and play from the attic. But they made so much noise coming across the attic floor, they stopped that. But it is still used today to help with the heating problem. This is a fine open space. What better place in cold weather or rainy weather than the attic of the church to dry your laundry? But the moisture was beginning to cause the plaster to crack. And so the Alcer Collegium, or the business board of the church, 1811, they asked the ladies to stop, and of course they did. You may have wondered how they changed the candles in the original chandeliers. They had a counterweight in the attic that you could reach up with a long pole and a hook and pull down the chandelier to a height that you could change the candles and then slowly let it back up. Here you have a view of the steel beam, 41.5 foot long, that was used when in 1912 when they knocked out the north wall to add the choir loft and the organ downstairs. That's what the trusses are connected to give it the roof support. If you've ever been to Christmas Love Feast, as I'm sure you have, the festoons are held in the top of the ceiling by this winch. And you let that down and you connect the 6 festoons to it, and slowly you roll it back up, and somebody from downstairs has got to let you know when you get up to the top. And that used to be by word of mouth, but then it became by walkie-talkie, and now you just use your cell phone to know when it's high enough. but that's where it's wound up each year. Up above the Rontaldo Memorial Building in the attic, there's a little chamber. And you open the door and you see the Carillon chimes. They were given in honor of Thomas Shirley Flashman, who in 1930, his wife and daughter gave these chimes to Home Church. And they've been played ever since, but they're hard to keep working. They can be played three ways. One is by a tape on this machine here. The second is from a keyboard up in this room. And the third is from the organ. Susan can play the chimes from the organ. The problem is that there's only one man now that's in the country that can work on these. He's got somebody he's training, but it goes bad sometimes, and then there's a long time before he can come back to fix it. But right at the time, this time, it is working. In the northwest corner of the attic, in the Rontaldo Memorial Building, is where the fire started on November the 29th, the day after Thanksgiving, 1991. A guide coming up with her group to the bakery saw smoke coming out, and she alerted the bakery. They in turn alerted the fire department, and smoke was coming out of the belfry and the top of the church. Fortunately, within an hour they had it put out, but it did $30,000 worth of damage, and if it had broken through the ceiling, the fire had, it would have been like a chimney. This attic would have just sucked it right up over the whole church. So we're very blessed that day that God was looking after our protection of this church. In 1912 and 13, Home Church underwent a major construction and renovation project. First, the 1841 chapel building was removed. Also, as we have mentioned, more than 40 feet of the north wall was removed and extended out to form a new chancel and choir loft. The 1870 renovation had 8 cast iron columns that held up the balcony. Those same columns were used in the 1912-13 renovation, but they were too long. Well, how did you cut? You can't cut cast iron. So the same cast iron pipes, columns, were put in the sanctuary with a foundation underneath them to hold the balcony's weight, but then on the floor, you'd never know that they had an additional part to them with a foundation, under a column foundation under it. A major feature of the 1912 and 13 renovation was the installation of the stained glass windows that still illuminate the sanctuary today. The windows were created by the J&R Lamb Studios of New Jersey. Beginning with the 4 windows in the chancel and continuing across the south wall, the windows portray the life of Christ. 2 new windows were created in the north wall flanking the chancel. One depicts Christ knocking at the door, which has no outside handle, and the other, Christ the Good Shepherd, holding the lost lamb. The Rontaldo Memorial Building also was constructed, the central feature of which was a large Sunday school room surrounded by classrooms and other spaces. On the ground floor below was the children's department. Walls were later constructed to enclose the upper space as a chapel, which was beautifully renovated recently as a new Zoll. But the balconies and former classrooms are still there. Coming from the Christian Education Building, this is what you now see on the second floor of the Rontaldo Memorial Building. It was built in 1913 as part of the expansion. It was named after Bishop Brontaler, Ed Brontaler, who was our pastor from 1877 to 1908. And it took in a wonderful new Sunday school building. And you're coming in from the northeast corner, and you wonder why this hallway is open here with pretty doors on this side and a wall on this side. And the truth of it is that this was looking down on the Sunday school building, the Sunday school assembly hall. In those days, you assembled and then broke up into classes and after the assembly. And these were Sunday school rooms. Down on the first floor is the cradle row and all the children's area. But this building housed, up on this floor, housed the men and women and older youth. Look in the opposite direction, you see 4 steps that go up to what was the back of the balcony. Today there are other classrooms up on that level. And you look at the picture and you see we're looking towards diagonally in the Brontaler Memorial Building, which is not the way it is today. And you look under the balcony and there were roll down doors that came down, and on the north side, the left, was for the men, and the band played in there. And on the southeast side was for women, and those rolled down doors, and they became their classroom when the assembly broke up. Now, in the middle of the 19th century, Salem folks were branching out into different parts of Salem and Winston. They started Christ Sunday School, Trinity Sunday School, East Sunday School, Calvary, Fairview. East became Freeze Memorial, and those were the original churches. During that Sunday school period, Bishop Brontaler started calling Home Sunday School. By 1887, we became the Home Church. But those members who still have ownership in the God's Acre and can be buried in the God's Acre are now under an organization called Salem Congregation, and they are a group that have their own trustees, their own elders, and they put on the Easter sunrise service and other worship services. In 1867, the members of Salem went across the bypass and on Elm Street, which is now Factory Row, and built Elm Street Sunday School and Chapel. And that's where they worshiped had Sunday school until this building was built in 1913. And you can see what a wonderful room it is. And you turn around and look at the other end, and you're looking out the back towards the corner. On the extreme right is the door to the entrance door to the chapel, and it was the same place as it is for the Zal now. And over on the left-hand side, there were classrooms, and then underneath, on the first floor, that's the choir room and the vestry and so forth. But this was a great change, and it was a wonderful building. In 1941, they built the Christian Education Building, and that's where a lot of the Sunday school was moved. In our last campaign, It's Our Time, It's Our Home, the chapel was turned into a Zal, which we have today. Now, our next view, we'll be going to the south door of the 1800 church.
We've just left by the south door, where the 1800 church building had a covered walkway that extended out to the front door, which opens onto Church Street. This has been an informative visit. We hope it makes members proud of our spiritual ancestors who built this 1800 sanctuary with the mission of serving Jesus Christ, our chief elder. Whether you're a member or just an interested visitor, perhaps the tour has given you admiration for the dedicated men and women who carved Salem out of the wilderness. Home Church has many opportunities to learn more about the history and mission of the Moravians. If you're not a member, come and visit. Or better yet, come and worship with us. In a tour like this one, you'll learn about where we live. In worship, you'll learn about who we are.